Our world is just teeming with life, right? It's diverse, it's complex, it's beautiful. But what if I told you that underneath all that chaos, there are these hidden mathematical rules? Seriously, principles that govern everything from a single bacterium all the way up to an entire ecosystem. So let's dive in and uncover these invisible numbers that shape our entire natural world. To get us started, let's chew on this question for a second. What happens when you take a species and you drop it into a brand new home? A place with tons of food, all the space it could want, and absolutely zero natural predators. What do you think would happen? Well, this isn't just some hypothetical question. This really happened. Back in the 1920s, the prickly pear cactus was introduced to Australia, and oh man, it caused complete and utter havoc. It just spread uncontrollably. It ended up choking out millions of hectares of good rangeland, making it totally useless. This cactus invasion, that's our central mystery. So how on earth did one little plant cause so much chaos? And maybe more importantly, how did they stop it? This is basically an ecological detective story. And to solve it, we first need to understand the fundamental laws of how populations work. All right, so if we're going to solve the case of the runaway cactus, we need to gather some scientific clues first. Let's start by decoding what a population really is, and what makes it tick. You see, in ecology, a population isn't just some random number. It's a very specific concept. It's a group of the same species, all living in one defined area. So think of all the cormorants in a wetland, or all the bacteria growing on a petri dish, or hey, every single lotus plant in a pond. Each of those is a distinct population. Now, here's what's really cool. A population has attributes that an individual just doesn't. Like you or I can be born, or we can die. But only a population has a birth rate or a death rate. And get this, these 4 factors you're looking at right here, that's it. Those are the only 4 things that can ever change a population's size. It's just additions from births and immigration, minus the subtractions from deaths and emigration. Simple as that. Okay, let's make this real for a second. Let's say we have a pond with 20 lotus plants, and over a year they reproduce and add 8 new baby lotus plants to the mix. So how do we turn that into a rate? It's actually super simple math. You just take the 8 new plants and divide by the 20 you started with, and boom, there you have it. That's how ecologists calculate a per capita birth rate, 0.4 new offspring per lotus per year. It's this kind of straightforward data that forms the bedrock of all population ecology. All right, so we've got the basics down on how populations are measured. Now let's see how this builds up into these really predictable patterns. Let's look at how they actually grow. Okay, so in a perfect world, I'm talking endless food, endless space, zero problems, a species can reach its full innate potential to grow. We call this exponential growth. The population doesn't just add a few new members each year, it multiplies. The more you have, the faster it grows, which gives you this crazy J-shaped curve that just shoots for the sky. There's this old story that just perfectly captures this idea. A king loses a game of chess and tells the winner he can have anything he wants. The winner asks for something that sounds humble, just 1 grain of wheat on the first square of the chessboard, 2 on the second, 4 on the third, and just keep doubling it. The king totally agrees, but he quickly realized that all the wheat in his entire kingdom wouldn't be enough to fill all 64 squares. That is the mind-bending power of exponential growth. But of course, in the real world, there's no such thing as unlimited resources, right? And that brings us to a much more realistic model, logistic growth. So instead of that J-shaped curve that goes to the moon, you get an S-shaped curve. The growth starts off fast, yeah, but then it starts to slow down and level off as the population starts hitting some natural limits. And this brings us to a really, really important idea, this concept of a limit. Ecologists call it the carrying capacity, and they usually just represent it with the letter K. It's basically the maximum number of individuals of one species that an environment can support forever. This is the natural break that stops that exponential growth from going on and on. And that brings us right back to our cactus mystery. See, now we have the scientific tools. We understand the language. We can figure out what happened in Australia and what natural check was missing that let that prickly pear run wild. And the solution? Well, it was kind of brilliant in its simplicity. Scientists went back to where the cactus originally came from, and they found its natural enemy, a specific moth that just loves to eat it. They brought this moth to Australia, and sure enough, it got the invasive cactus population right back under control. This whole interaction is called predation. And yeah, we usually think of lions and gazelles, but predation is nature's fundamental way of moving energy up the food chain. It's also one of the most powerful checks and balances there is for keeping prey populations from just completely exploding. But here's where it gets really mind-bending. This reveals a surprising truth about predators. There was this famous experiment where scientists removed a predator starfish from a coastal area. And you know what happened? Biodiversity collapsed. More than 10 other species went extinct. Why? Well, it turns out the starfish had been keeping the most aggressive competitive species in check, which allowed all these other weaker species to thrive. So predators can actually increase diversity. Wild, right? So predation is a huge deal, but it's really just one piece of this giant interconnected puzzle. The reality is that in nature, no species is an island. They're all woven together in this incredibly complex web of interactions. So ecologists have this neat way of classifying how species interact. A plus sign means a species benefits, a minus means it's harmed, and a zero means it's, not really affected. So you get things like mutualism, where everybody wins, and competition, where everybody kind of loses because they're fighting over the same stuff. And here is a perfect example of that mutualism, that plus plus. A fig plant absolutely needs this specific wasp to pollinate its flowers. And in return, the wasp needs the fig as a safe little nursery to lay its eggs. It's a classic win-win. Both of them need each other to survive. So I guess the big takeaway here is this. Every single habitat is a biological community that's built on countless interactions, just like these. Even a plant that makes its own food from sunlight still needs microbes in the soil and animals to pollinate it. Absolutely nothing survives alone. And all of this, it leads to one final, pretty heavy question. We've seen that every species in nature has a carrying capacity, a hard limit. But through technology, medicine, agriculture, we humans have managed to push and bend and seemingly break these rules, raising our own limits again and again. So what about us? What is the carrying capacity of planet Earth for human beings? Now that is something to think about.